On October 19, 1781, the American Patriots defeated the British Army at the Battle of Yorktown, forcing General Cornwallis to surrender. After the Treaty of Paris was signed on September of 1783, the War for Independence had officially come to an end, and America was now completely free from British control. However, the colonists would soon realize that independence would be very difficult to maintain. America would now have to survive on her own, as a new nation. The war was over. Britain could no longer interfere in American affairs. Therefore, many new adjustments were brought about by America's newfound independence. In spite of these favorable changes, it came to the attention of many Americans that a central authority was needed to join the states together as a nation. Before the Declaration of Independence was signed, a Continental Congress-appointed committee presented a plan of state unification on July 12, 1776. This plan was called the Articles of Confederation, and it was finally accepted in November of 1777. They were eventually ratified by all 13 states in March 1781.
For this short time that the Articles of Confederation were in effect, they served their purpose. It gave the people a chance to break away from a strong central government. It gave them a chance to feel that they had some type of power. The state was the central government in their life.
Unfortunately, it was not long before several weaknesses were exposed in the Articles.
What they found out was, after the Revolutionary War, the government of the United States owed $160 million. The Articles of Confederation did not allow for the central government to tax. In order to pay off this $160 million, they had to go out and ask the states, would you mind giving us so much money? As the years went by, the states paid less and less money, and all of a sudden the debts kept compounding and compounding, and we owed people more and more money, and the people that we owed money to were countries in Europe, and the primary one was France. France wanted their money.
Another area of conflict involved trade.
When it came to any type of trade between states, it was one state claimed this type of right over another state, and there was no organizing central agency that would be that had the power to say this is the way we should conduct commerce.
That was one of the reasons that they needed help, was to regulate the trade between the states, and it was Maryland, Virginia that was instrumental in calling on George Washington to say we need help in regulating trade between the states. We need some organization. Many of the states are doing their own thing, and we need to develop some type of system of organization out of this chaos. And a lot of world countries was looking at the states at this time under the Articles and saying, who do we deal with? Who do we trade with? Do we trade with just one state at a time, individually, or do we trade with you as a country, as a whole? Do you represent a whole? We don't really know who you are. And so it's very embarrassing to the United States, actually to the states at that time, because they couldn't answer that question either.
But what demonstrated the problems of the Articles the most were the events that led to Shays' Rebellion.
A lot of the men that had fought in the Revolutionary War were small-time farmers. The banks were starting to foreclose on their farms, and also the taxes started getting higher and higher, and they couldn't pay the taxes. They felt that they were getting, that the big bankers were taking advantage of them, and they turned to Daniel Shays, who had been a captain in the Revolutionary War, and Daniel Shays was also one of these farmers, and they went and they got a hold of some muskets and some weapons, and they started to march on the capital of Massachusetts, which was Springfield. At that point, the government of Massachusetts raised a small army, and there was a clash, and the great concern, not only in Massachusetts, but in other states at the time, was the fact that there was no central government that they could appeal to, and what would happen in other states if all of a sudden backwood farmers got together and started to march on state government.
After this uprising, it became clear to the Confederation Congress that the Articles were in desperate need of change if America wished to avoid future disaster. So the states were asked to send delegates to a convention, which would be held in Philadelphia in May of 1787.
they realized what they were talking about was going to be very, very important. They posted guards at the door, and they agreed not to talk about anything that was going on in the hall.
The whole purpose of meeting in Philadelphia was to draw up with a plan of government. Or really, actually, it was to fix what was wrong with the articles and repair them. And within the week, they began to realize that there was so much to repair and so much to fix that they said, let's just start all over again with a brand new government. Let's pull in some of the articles, some of what we did in the Second Continental Congress, but let's put it all and make a brand new government out of it.
George Washington was elected to preside over the convention. Shortly after it commenced, the Virginia delegates headed by Edmund Randolph presented their plan of government.
A large part of it was written and created by James Madison, who was later called the father of the Constitution. They felt in the Virginia plan that if we had 3 branches, they would each have their separate and individual responsibilities and duties, but they would all be co-equal. They wanted a government where the powers would be divided in the government itself, so no one area could usurp the other parts of the government.
Instead of having only one body of legislators, they needed 2, what we now have the Senate and the House of Representatives.
The problem that they had was how many votes each state would get in Congress. Virginia could carry a lot more weight, they had a lot more people. And when Virginia said, you know, for representation, it should be based on a couple of things, and that's money and population. So that was easy for them to say because they had both.
William Patterson and the New Jersey delegates proposed an alternate plan.
Their answer to the Virginia plan on representation was totally the opposite. Equal distribution of votes, 1 vote apiece, at least have every state the same amount of votes, so that there will be no more than any one state that would be in total control of this new government.
This went on because, of course, the small states wanted to be equal with the large states. The large states said, no, we're kind of getting, this isn't right because we have more people.
When it seemed as though nothing could resolve the conflict over representation, the Connecticut delegation led by Roger Sherman introduced a compromise later to be known as the Great Compromise.
Connecticut came up with the idea that we have now. Why not have a fixed number of people in the Senate? Each state would have 2 senators, but when it came to the House of Representatives, that would be based on population.
But there would be more compromises to come.
There were many compromises that were made after the Connecticut Compromise. And one of them, right on the heels of the Connecticut Compromise, was the 3/5 Compromise.
This compromise was necessary because of the conflict over slaves, whether they should be counted in the southern states' representation.
The problem was they were excited in the fact that if we can count our slaves, then we will get more representation in the lower house. But when you have some states that had less slaves, it was going to be very difficult for that to happen because they would again have the problem of not feeling that they were as represented as the larger states with more slaves. So they came up with the 3/5 Compromise. Every state could count 3 out of every 5 slaves.
After much debate, many agreements were reached, and a committee was formed to draft a document reflecting them. When the draft was presented, a month was spent refining it, and the Committee of Style and Arrangement was formed to create a final version. It was submitted to the delegation for signing on September 17, 1787. Of the 55 delegates, only 39 signed the document. Undoubtedly, none of those were completely satisfied, but they realized compromise was necessary. This concept is summarized in the words of the wise Benjamin Franklin.
I confess that I do not entirely approve of this Constitution at present, but, sir, I am not sure I shall never approve it. In these sentiments, sir, I agree to this Constitution with all its faults.
I think what amazes me is to imagine how did they come up with this type of government.
We can add to the Constitution. Hopefully we will never lose it, but we will know that we should protect it and hold it sacred because it is our life, it is our government, and it represents the most wonderful term and word, which is freedom.